Hey everyone, it's Sevi. In this video, I'm continuing my discussion of Nahida's team comps now with a focus on Bloom's sub-reactions, HYPERBLOOM, and Burgeon. If you haven't watched my previous Nahida guides, you can check them out first or afterwards since this video is a direct continuation of those. With that, let's get into her HYPERBLOOM teams first. To quickly recap, HYPERBLOOM is when Electro is applied on a Dendro core, which then turns it into this missile that deals high single target damage. Each enemy can take up to 2 instances of HYPERBLOOM damage every 0.5 seconds. This can make it effective in single target scenarios, but also in multi-target scenarios where you can generate multiple cores at a time to launch many HYPERBLOOMs simultaneously. HYPERBLOOM has been such a strong team even before Nahida arrived, but with her, it's become even better and opened up new comps that wouldn't have been as effective without her Dendro application mechanics. Nahida's HYPERBLOOM teams are built to work and incredibly easy to play, even if you don't put in correct rotations or be conscious of elemental gauges. Of course, knowing those things can make your experience better, but the point is that this is a very simple team to play while being insanely strong. The template for a HYPERBLOOM team will be Nahida for Dendro, a Hydro applicator, and Electro that will trigger HYPERBLOOMs, and a flexible slot that isn't disruptive to the HYPERBLOOM reaction process. In fact, as I'll show you later, you can just start with Barbara and Lisa and it will work. Improving your HYPERBLOOM team even from its most basic form is mostly a matter of using party combos that can provide you higher damage potential and a more comfortable or faster experience. I'll be showing various combinations of HYPERBLOOM teams with Nahida and discussing viable teammates and various synergies to give you an idea of how flexible her teams are. Like my previous video, it's difficult to showcase every iteration, but as long as you understand the essential concepts, it will be easy to create your own teams based on who you have. Before that, how should Nahida be built for HYPERBLOOM and Burgeon? You'll probably want to build her with Deepwood Memories as she's most likely going to be the only user of it on the team. You want her to shred Dendro resistance because that affects HYPERBLOOM and Burgeon damage too. There might be some uncommon cases where someone else is holding the Deepwood set and Nahida can just go for a Gilded Dreams or a 2-piece combo of Dendro damage or EM sets. So if that's the case, then it's fine as well. Off-field, Nahida can also either use a triple EM build or an EM Dendro crit build. The difference is very small that substats and team buffs can swing one build in favor of another. Nahida also has her Ascension 1 passive which grants EM to the active character inside her burst based on the highest EM in the team. It's possible to utilize this by keeping your Electro trigger on field, thereby increasing their EM to boost their HYPERBLOOM damage. However, there are also cases where you would rather use Nahida on field. Why is that? Because even if she isn't the HYPERBLOOM trigger, she can apply a lot of Dendro together with fast Hydro applicators, which can lead to more cores generated, which results in more HYPERBLOOM damage. Either way can work fine, but in some teams I'll show, there can be a noticeable difference in DPS output by using her on field. But I can also understand if you might prefer to see your Electro character on field instead, and so wouldn't mind not maximizing Nahida's Dendro application. Another build tip is that your Electro trigger wants a full EM build to maximize HYPERBLOOM damage, but if their Electro application is also dependent on their burst, like Lisa, they'll need enough ER to burst on cooldown. An extra optional build you can add to the team is having someone equip the Instructor set, which increases your team's EM if the user triggers a reaction while on field. If a unit in the team doesn't have another best-in-slot set to use, the Instructor set can help you squeeze out a bit more HYPERBLOOM damage. Now it's time for the team's showcase. I'll be explaining why certain units in showcases are good, some pointers to keep in mind, important concepts, and so on. I'll also display rotation samples on screen that you can opt to follow or not. First off, let's start with a bang by showing a team that outputs very high single target damage featuring Nahida, Yelan, Xingqiu, and Kuki or Raiden. It deals massive single target damage thanks to both Yelan and Xingqiu's Hydro attacks combined with the HYPERBLOOM damage. This is also one case where it's beneficial to keep Nahida as an on-field driver. Since there's so much Hydro application on the team, you'll want to complement it with Nahida auto attacks and try Karma procs applying Dendro. And if Xingqiu is C6, you'll really want Nahida on field since C6 Xingqiu applies Hydro really fast. As for electro triggers, Raiden and Kuki are also highly recommended off-field electro triggers for any of Nahida's HYPERBLOOM teams. I have Denjo team videos on these too if you want to learn more, but in essence they're very convenient to use since you only need to activate their skill and you can switch them out right away. You don't need to build anything else except EM on them. The main difference is that Kuki consolidates being the trigger and healer, which can be more comfortable, since this team's only source of healing is Xingqiu, unless Nahida has prototype Amber. Without Kuki, then if you think you need the survivability, Kuki is the more decisive choice. However, while Raiden does not have healing, her skill lasts for 25 seconds, so refreshing it is less of a hassle, while Kuki lasts shorter, thereby needing constant refreshing. Raiden's skill can also proc at a distance, so if you don't like being too close to your enemies, she's safer. And Raiden's skill can technically proc faster at every 0.9 seconds, while Kuki's is every 1.5 seconds. However, you will only feel the benefits of this if your Denjo core generation is optimized. Otherwise, you will likely get a similar number of HYPERBLOOMs from either electro unit. Anyway, either one of them is top tier for convenience. So you might be thinking that this team is too inaccessible, especially if you choose to use Raiden, resulting in 3 5-stars on the team. Then let's go all the way to the freest of the free-to-play friendly options in the next showcase. You can't get any more F2P friendly members than Barbara, Lisa, and Kaeya. And with this team, it proves that if they're built well already, you have a default team to start enjoying HYPERBLOOM Nahida with. Barbara is both a Hydro applicator and healer, which addresses your survival needs. Then Lisa is the HYPERBLOOM trigger. And like I said, the flex slot can be anything as long as it doesn't clash with HYPERBLOOMs. In this case, Kaeya as a cryo flex unit actually works and adds the freeze reaction on top of HYPERBLOOM, giving it some aspect of crowd control. I can certainly feel that this is an F2P team. It's not going to have blazingly fast clear times compared to most other teams, but these truly free teammates are still very capable. Replacing any of the 3 starters here with a better 4-star or 5-star alternative can only make it better. Lisa does have a high ER requirement to burst every rotation, so I built about 150% ER on her, then gave Kaeya a Favonius sword. On the topic of ER needs, don't forget to address your team's ER requirements, especially if their elemental application or utilities are from their bursts. Your team's ER needs will vary, and in general, if you find yourself not being able to burst when necessary, then your team is likely facing energy issues. Building more ER or adding in energy-giving equipment helps with that. For this next team, Candace is a character that many of us felt did not have an optimal or efficient use yet upon her release. She's far from being a common Hydro option in HYPERBLOOM teams since there are way better alternatives, but to show how flexible HYPERBLOOM is and how well Nahida can synergize with even suboptimal teammates, I comped her with Candace anyway. It's ideal if Candace is at least C1 to extend her Hydro infusion effect. If you already have her C6, then even better. And to optimize this team even more, I went with teammates that had 15 seconds or less cooldowns to turn this into a 15-second rotation. The reason for that is to maximize Candace's Hydro application and infusion uptime, since it only lasts a maximum of 12 seconds with C1. Having melee units on the team to apply Hydro with their infused attacks is also preferable. So in my example, I put Rosaria and Kuki so that aside from Candace's AoE Hydro procs when switching characters, I can also insert normal attacks between switching to apply Hydro. Having a second Hydro on the team will be a significant improvement to Dendro core generation, like Mona who has a 15-second burst cooldown. But to make it 4-star friendly, I put in Rosaria instead to create another freeze HYPERBLOOM variant like the previous team. Yes, I know what you're thinking, this is far from the best HYPERBLOOM team possible, but it goes to show that Nahida's HYPERBLOOM teams are very accommodating and hard to get wrong. For our 4th HYPERBLOOM team sample, let's take a look at one that uses a fast on-field Hydro applicator, Ayato. Here he performs as an on-field AoE Hydro unit that can also add some off-field Hydro with his burst. Childe in a HYPERBLOOM team has a similar role as Ayato, being another on-field AoE Hydro applicator. However, Childe applies much more Hydro due to his attacks and Riptide procs, so much so that he can sometimes overtake Nahida's Dendro aura, which leads to less Dendro cores generated. This can be eased by throwing in a second Dendro, but either way, Childe can still perform as a viable Hydro teammate. I'm also showcasing Beidou as another alternative for the flex slot. She allows you to run a double electro comp without stealing hyperblooms, since Beidou's chain lightning cannot target cores or deal splash damage. And with Beidou, Ayato can equip a 4-piece Thundering Fury set to reduce his skill cooldown and give him more on-field presence. For one more HYPERBLOOM team sample showcase, it's a case of using an on-field Electro driver. Many of the Electro options can take an on-field playstyle, but units like Razor and Cyno have no choice since their Electro application comes from on-field abilities. Here, Razor is built full EM, which is unconventional for his usual build, but it works. Otherwise, just replace him with whoever you have. You can also see that the flex slot is a Geo unit since it won't interrupt with HYPERBLOOM reactions. Zhongli is always very good if you need comfort, but Beidou can also do the job. Anyway, you can see that Nahida's HYPERBLOOM teams have a lot of mix and match options with the Electro, Hydro, and Flex units available. A lot of it is up to which characters you personally like, and it's very likely they will work in such a team. Hopefully, now you've gotten a good idea of HYPERBLOOM's templates. Now, I'm going to showcase a variant of HYPERBLOOM called Quickbloom. As you know, Dendro plus Electro creates the Quicken Aura, and Hydro can get rid of it to trigger Bloom and generate a core. But by using slower Hydro application in a HYPERBLOOM team, the Quicken Aura stays on the enemy for longer, which allows your Electro unit to trigger more aggravate reactions, as well as Nahida getting spread reactions too. Quickbloom team's damage source is then a combination of aggravate, HYPERBLOOM, and spread reactions. Nahida's build also varies a bit here. Your on-field Electro trigger will not be building full EM, so in this particular team it's more advisable to build full EM on Nahida instead so that she can buff the Electro trigger, resulting in more HYPERBLOOM and aggravate damage. For our first showcase, Cyno will be the Electro trigger. There are other on-field Electro triggers like Keqing or Razor, but Cyno is one Electro unit that got a good boost from Nahida. Quicken can now have better uptime since Nahida has stronger Dendro application compared to Dendro Traveler. Another advantage to using Quickbloom Cyno with Nahida is that her burst duration is extended if there's a Hydro unit in the team, which can buff Cyno's on-field time even longer. In this showcase, I'm using Fischl for the single target damage and battery utility, though her Os won't last that long for Cyno's burst duration, but if you're up against multiple enemies, Beidou can be a better pick. Yae also works as a quick bloomer by relying on her turret and auto attacks to proc cores and deal aggravate damage. Her turret can target cores, but they can also deal splash damage on enemies which will trigger cores. There are times though that her turrets don't target the right enemies or cores, which is why playing her on field addresses that problem. Now I'm using Beidou for her multi-target damage and to give Yae some resistance interruption, and you can always switch to your preferred alternative in these team templates like Barbara if you don't have Kokomi. Ayato is another example of a slow Hydro applicator by only using his off-field burst, though he'll need a lot of ER since he needs to burst every rotation. The second sub-reaction of Bloom is Burgeon, which is when Pyro reacts on a Dendro core to deal AoE damage. The template is now Nahida, a Hydro unit, a Pyro trigger, and a flex slot. While there are varying levels of potential for our current Pyro units to be Burgeon triggers, there are also particular units that are more convenient and suited to the task. Burgeon is also more lax with optimizing core generation in multi-target scenarios. That's because of the damage limitations of the Burgeon reaction. Since enemies can only take 2 instances of Burgeon damage at a time every 0.5 seconds, and Burgeon causes AoE damage, trying to trigger so many Burgeons at the same time can be a waste. And you'll generally want fast Hydro application, which can be achieved by getting 2 Hydro units or using a really fast Hydro applicator like Childe. That's because Hydro prevents or stops burning and ensures that there will be more blooms for generating Dendro cores. Without that Hydro, the enemies will instead get more burning reaction uptime, which is not what you want in a Burgeon team. For our first sample, I'm showcasing Thoma, who's now discovered one of, if not his best, role as a Burgeon trigger. Xingqiu is highly recommended as he synergizes with Thoma by effectively putting out burning to ensure more core generation, and since Thoma and Xingqiu both require normal attacks to proc their bursts. I opted for Barbara as the second Hydro unit as a free-to-play example, but you can always swap her in with others like Kokomi or Yelan. In this next example, one substitute for double hydro is to switch one of them with an electro unit. This is another way to prevent burning from overtaking the enemy's aura. What happens is that electro will react with pyro or vice versa, which will trigger overload but will also get rid of the pyro aura to prevent or lessen burning again. So for this to work, you want an electro unit that won't steal cores, such as Fischl or Beidou. Finally, here's an uncommon team that features two alternatives for Hydro application and Burgeon triggers, which are Childe and Kazuha respectively. The idea is that Kazuha will infuse his abilities with Pyro to trigger cores, but to do that he needs Bennett in the team since Bennett self-infuses the active character with Pyro, which Kazuha can swirl. Then Childe is a very fast Hydro applicator whose burst can immediately put out any Pyro or burning auras on the enemies, while his Riptide procs will apply a lot of Hydro in an AoE very quickly, ensuring that Dendro cores are continuously generated while preventing further burning on enemies. This will be a relatively quick swap team in a tight 15 to 18 second rotation. Childe's burst and Riptides vaporize and bloom, while Kazuha's pyro infusions will do most of the burgeoning and burning on the side. To keep the team's quick swap playstyle, you shouldn't overextend Childe's melee stance, otherwise you can end up unnecessarily prolonging your rotation. And those are the different HYPERBLOOM, Quickbloom, and Burgeon team showcases. Again, if you don't have the specific units I featured or mentioned, Nahida's Dendro mechanics make it very easy to slot in whichever substitutes you have. Just keep in mind the important concepts and tips that I shared here when composing your own HYPERBLOOM and Burgeon teams, and comment down below what team variations you've been playing. The next Nahida teams video will cover the more niche ones like Nilou, Bloom, and Reverse Melt. So if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications to be the first to see them. Don't forget to leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, and I will see you all soon. Take care!